Hey friends, it's Sarah Rittendale. When I decided to act against all the toxic thoughts and feelings I was living with daily and try to become my best self, I quickly fell into the very common trap of perfectionism. So, I decided to create a space where wellness doesn't mean being flawless. Becoming the best version of yourself doesn't just come from conversations about managing your mean mind, learning confidence, and always doing the things that you're supposed to do. Here, we talk about how normal your toxic feelings and thoughts are, that you're not doing something wrong because you don't always feel, think, or act how you envision your best self to, how to implement self-improvement strategies in a realistic way, and we do this through a variety of topics that often prompt our best selves to crave emergence. My mission? Inspire you to recognize that you don't have to be perfect to consider yourself whole, healthy, and well. This is the Wellish podcast. Hello, and welcome back to Wellish, the podcast where we take all things that are wellness and filter them through real life, sometimes messy, sometimes comical, but always honest lenses. I'm your host, Sarah. Have to share the little behind the scenes story. First of all, welcome. You found your place to unpack what wellness actually looks like, not just the picture perfect Instagram, Pinterest post, but in the real everyday moments. And in true, me core, true me fashion, and a real testament of self-compassion, which is what we're talking about today. I had so many technical difficulties when recording this episode. I have to share the little behind the scenes story. The first time I recorded this episode, let's just say only the last 20 minutes of the conversation were actually saved. Yep, the rest was lost and we had to re-record the entire episode. So shout out to Patty because she was super flexible and super kind about it. But you know what? Sometimes life throws us curveballs and it's all about how we respond. And I had already talked to her once about self-compassion, so I kept catching myself saying, "You're such an idiot, you're such an idiot, you're such an idiot," and saying, "No, mistakes happen, things happen, and I'm just glad we got to do it again." And I think it turned out even better the second time around, to be totally honest. So here we are. Another technical issue that I had is that my audio didn't record the way that it should have. It didn't pick up from my microphone at all. So she sounds a little rough this go around there, pal. So bear with me. I apologize. Thank you for loving the episode. Thank you for loving us, even though we struggle, because that's life, right? That's what Wellish is about. So like I said, this week we're talking about self-compassion, which is something that I feel like we don't dive deeply enough into on a regular basis. I feel like a lot of the time it's more self-talk, where self-compassion is more of this all around just being kind to yourself. And if you're anything like me, it's easy to forget that you deserve compassion just as much as the next person. A lot of the time, because your brain is probably just working like that on autopilot. It's the way that it perceives you in your life in almost this like mean, negative lens, a way that you would never talk to people that you love. But here's the thing. You do deserve that compassion, and not just when things are going well, but especially when you're overwhelmed, anxious, or like you're falling short of your own expectations. So in today's episode, I'm really excited to share my conversation with someone who is an absolute expert in this space, Patty Cabot. She's a coach, an author, and a total powerhouse when it comes to healing from trauma, embracing self-compassion, and letting go of perfectionism. Patty and I talked about breaking the self-blame cycle and learning to embrace self-compassion when it feels easier to believe that negative voice over the positive one. We also talk about how improving your self-compassion can actually help you start attracting the life you want because you stop hiding from who you really are. You're no longer afraid for people to see you how you see you. There's so much golden wisdom in this episode, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. But before we get started, I just want to take a quick second to say that the best way to support the show is by leaving a rating and a review. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any more episodes like this one, where we explore all of the real, unfiltered ways to prioritize your wellness. And I just want to remind you that wellness is not about being perfect. It's about progress. And sometimes it's about accepting yourself as you are in this moment. Flaws, quirks, everything. Quirks? I don't know. See, like, I can't even talk. Is that a quirk? Love that. We're all just out here trying our best, and that's enough. So when you listen to this and you're like, oh shit, now I'm catching myself not being compassionate or all of the areas that I could be nicer to myself, and it happens over and over. That's not an excuse to be like, oh, idiot. I always do this. I always fuck this up. It's to say, okay, now I'm aware of it and that's progress and I'm getting somewhere with that. And then the next time you do it, maybe you do something a little bit better and that's progress. So that's what we're celebrating in self compassion and in all wellness. Okay, now that we're all set, grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's conversation. Patty, thank you so much for being on Wellish today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Sarah. I am very happy to be here with you and your community today.
Absolutely. So, I really wanted to talk to you about self compassion. I wanted to talk to you specifically as somebody who has experienced trauma. And to me, that almost means that you've come from a place, maybe even not to compare traumas, but harder than most, that, you really started from rock bottom when building your self compassion and being able to build it to the place that you are now. I'm really interested in talking to you about that self blame cycle and then the discovery of self talk and being able to, or discovery of self compassion and being able to talk to yourself a little bit better. So I would love to start with you telling me about your background, what it is that got you to this place and how you started to become the person you are today, how you got to this place of self compassion.
Sure, that sounds great. So, as background, I struggled with my weight for many years. I would gain or lose 50 to 75 pounds every 2 years, and I did it for 20 years. And I could never figure out why. And, I'm a fantastic dieter, so I could always lose it, but I couldn't maintain it. And finally, I was in my late 30s, and I decided that I was going to be stuck in this cycle forever unless I figured out why I was doing this. And so I went to see a therapist who dealt with eating disorders. And we kind of went through my history, like what led me to be who I am today. And one of the things we landed on was my childhood sexual abuse. And I was always aware of it, but I never thought about it. I never dealt with it. I never addressed it. It was just something that kind of like I tucked deep underground and went and lived my life. And basically, she was like, your weight is a symptom of that. And until you deal with that, meaning your childhood sexual abuse, you are always going to have issues with your weight. And so it was at that point that we really started delving into my past. And, I think that I always felt ruined, I always felt bad. And that was just kind of how I was. That was kind of my natural state. And I think that I was very critical of myself. And I always assumed everything was my fault. If somebody didn't like me, if something went wrong, it was always my fault. I always blamed myself. So I had zero self compassion for myself. And I was very much a taskmaster. I'm very demanding of myself and kind of the standards that I applied to myself. So self compassion and self care was hard fought. And it took honestly many years of me being in therapy to kind of like not only learn the skills to develop and, behave in a way that was like, in keeping with fostering, good mental health, but believing that I deserve to be kind to myself. Because I think a lot of people that are unkind to themselves think that they should be punished, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think so, like I had said to you before, Wellish is about being imperfect, that it is this idea, like I feel a lot of the time we have this standard that we're trying to reach. You're trying to get to this next level of self compassion. You see it on Instagram, you see it in books, and you think, okay, this is what this looks like, this is what I'm going to strive for. And it doesn't look like that most of the time. The self compassion is imperfect in itself. You can work to be nicer to yourself, but it's not going to be 100% of the time. And I think something that we had talked about when we originally recorded was the root of the problem, that you have to discover that root. And before you can do that, or when you do that, is when you realize that all of these self-compassion issues come up from there. Can you talk a little bit more about what we were talking about with the sexual trauma being your root and not realizing it? That was the reason that was the body image.
Sure. It's interesting. Like I started battling with my weight in my teens, which coincidentally is when, I started going through puberty. And it kind of made sense, right? Like as I look back to think that suddenly becoming sexually like developing and becoming of age, like obviously generated all of this turmoil within me, right? And when I was sexually abused, I was very young. It started before I was 5. My mother, it was primarily my stepfather. They were together until I was 11. So it went on for a number of years. And then we moved across country and it was like out of sight, out of mind. I was free, right? Like I start over, except that's not how life works. Any trauma that you have, whether you're physically abused, emotionally abused, neglected, sexually abused, it doesn't matter what the trauma is. Unless you address it, it's always there. It's always a wound within you. And, these wounds, everybody experiences life through their own prism. And, we all end up developing and growing based on things that happen to us, right? Like we have defense mechanisms to protect ourselves. We do all of these things based on what happens to us. And when I went into therapy and I went in thinking, I'm finally going to crack the code on why I can't maintain my weight loss, like I was flabbergasted when it was tied back to my sexual abuse. Absolutely flabbergasted. And had I had till the end of time locked in a room by myself, I was never going to get there. I was just never going to connect the dots. And I would say to anybody who battles the same issue repeatedly, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, whatever, if you battle it repeatedly and you're not making traction, chances are you haven't identified the root cause of your issue. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I needed help doing. I needed somebody else to say, it's not about that at all. And I will say, again, I struggled with my weight for many years. My weight became the easiest thing to manage once we started working on what the actual issue was, which is not to say that I'm not still tormented by the way I look and what I weigh. And, I'm female and that's our culture. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, unfortunately, that is absolutely true. But it really did become the easiest part to manage compared to everything else I was dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it like dealing with self blame and perfectionism, particularly in relation to your weight and past trauma?
So I was a binge eater, which is very common among people that are sexually abused, particularly children who are sexually abused, which is so fascinating that there's a different eating disorder for basically every kind of trauma that there is. And just to share a horrifying statistic, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys under the age of 18 are sexually abused. So
Wow.
if you're with 3 people, look left, look right, it's one of you. I mean, that's how prevalent it
Wow.
is. And we never talk about it. It's the most shameful of the shameful. And I think that's part of it. It's this culture of shame, things that happen to us that are too shameful to talk about. So we lock them deep inside. And that kind of becomes, I think it informs the people we become, that there is fundamentally something wrong, something bad. That's how I felt. I felt ruined, right? I didn't objectively, if you had said to me, if you said, Patty, this is my story, I would have had nothing but compassion for you. But for myself, all I could see is that somehow it must have been my fault. And why was it my fault? Well, because nobody else took responsibility. So if nobody else is going to take responsibility, then that means it's my fault, right? And children also view the world, they have a very kind of egocentric view of everything happens because of them. I don't know what you asked me that I went off on that tangent.
What we talking about? Oh, dealing with self blame and perfectionism.
Yeah, so I think for me, I always was extremely critical about everything I did. But I think I viewed myself as being fundamentally flawed. So I
Hmm.
had exacting standards for what I must do and, how I must behave and what I must achieve because I felt worthless. Right. And I think the flip side of the coin of that is somebody who feels the same way, who doesn't even try, right? Because they just feel like there's no point.
Right. What would you say about internalizing the struggles as personal failures?
That's a hard one. You and I had touched on that a little bit ago. And I think that, with age comes wisdom, you would hope. And I would say that, what you think is important when you're younger, I used to hate it when they would say things like, when you're older, you'll see. And it's like, it's not that you're not able to see the world for what it is, but the difference is you don't have the same life experiences. So your perspective is different. You just given the nature of time, you don't have the same experiences as somebody who's 10 years older than you or 20 years older than you. And I think that a lot of things that seem very important when you're young, you get a little older and you're like, you know what, that's not important at all. And I think for me, what I've realized is it's okay to fail at anything if I give it my all. The great shame for me is when you don't apply yourself. So that is like, If I throw myself into something and it goes horribly wrong, that's okay. I did everything I could. I gave it everything I could. I did the best I could.
Yeah.
If it's not a
Absolutely.
win, it's not a win. Okay, I'll learn. I'll get better. I'll get smarter. I'll figure it out for next time. But it's when you approach things in kind of a half-assed manner and it doesn't go your way. And I don't like that. I don't respect that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of emotional toll did believing you were at fault take on your mental health?
Oh, I think I absolutely believed I was ruined. I absolutely believed that I was unacceptable, that no man would ever love me, that, if I didn't tell anybody. I was in my early 40s before I told my closest friends. I didn't tell anybody other than the people who knew in my family. It was the worst thing that I could tell people, right? Because I was so afraid that they would see me the way I saw myself. And I did not
Mhm.
want that. And, it took my therapist 3 years to convince me that I could tell my friends. And what she had said to me was, if any of them came to you and told you your story and it was about them, would you judge them? No, of course I wouldn't judge them. And you would have nothing but compassion. And she's like, do you really think your friends are so different from you? And it's like, no, of course they're kind people. Of course they're compassionate. Of course they love me, you
Mhm.
know?
That is such a good point. You said when I first had asked you that question, and we were talking about your, for lack of a better word, complex with the romantic relationships and feeling like that wasn't for you, you couldn't attain that. You had said something, and if you could remember about that it's not that a healthy person doesn't do that. What did you say?
So what I had said was is that I felt like my weight was the barrier to me having the relationships that I wanted. That I didn't look good enough, that I wasn't pretty enough. It's funny because at different points when I was thin, because I was either thin or heavy, it was always a pendulum swing for me. And when I was thin and nobody wanted me, I was like, it's my personality. Like nobody
Mhm.
likes me. And then when I was heavier, I was like, well, it's because I'm heavy. And what I had said was, mentally healthy people don't think that people find them acceptable or not, desirable or not, based on the way they look, right?
Yeah.
They just don't. And if you look around outside, I live in New York City, there's a million people in my neighborhood. If I walk outside, I am going to see people of every stripe and variety, all of whom have not all, but a lot of them in romantic relationships. And it's not like they walked off the cover of a magazine.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And the other point to that is what my ideal of perfect beauty is may not be anything even remotely similar to your idea of perfect beauty, right? Like we all have our own likes and dislikes. And I think it's fascinating. When I used to have a friend who truly the men in uniform, it could be a bus driver, it could be a serviceman, it didn't matter. She liked a man in a uniform. Like that was just
What
that
you
was
been
just
to?
her thing. All right.
Absolutely. It's so true. Short, tall, all those
Exactly.
things.
People have their thing, right? So
Right, absolutely.
yeah.
But I love what you say about that it's not healthy to think that you are the problem. Is that a way to word that? Because I
Or
think,
that it's based on your physical appearance. I mean,
yeah,
assuming that you're taking care of yourself and that you're healthy, clean, those things. I mean, obviously, if you're.
right. But even related to like that, you would say it was your personality, but like it's not like that was what was at fault either, you know?
No, but I think it's hard when you can't objectively point to what the issue is.
Sure.
And, basically what ended up coming out is after working with my shrink for many years is that I somehow projected a keep away vibe. And it was loud and clear to anybody who was kind of in front of me. So any man who was interested in me, it was very clear that I wanted him to keep away. I mean, I couldn't see it,
Right.
but there it is funny. Like I had thought to myself at one point, I was like a box completely enclosed and there's no way in, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to let people in. And my best friend, like I was always like, if I could be her, she's open. She has an open heart. She has an open mind. Accepts everything good in this world that happens to her, and good things happen to her. And it's not like, nothing bad ever happens to her. That's not how life is either, but she's just open. And that for me was like can I ever be open? And I become so much more open. And it's like, only if you're open can you accept really beautiful things,
Mhm.
but it's like, you have to be willing to, like, I remember at one point I had thought, like I always loved the story of Pandora's box, that it's
Mhm.
all the evils of the world, and somebody opens the lid and they all escape, and then they slam down the lid and the only thing left inside is hope. And I thought, did that become me? Did I wall off my heart so that only hope was left inside because I was so afraid of being hurt again? And I think a lot of us are very afraid of being hurt, and we protect ourselves in ways that are not necessarily apparent to ourselves.
God, is that true? I don't think have actually heard somebody verbalize like that what I've thought in my head. So accurate. And like okay, so the story that I think of that I super relate to, me and my best friend were literally the same exact way. I was you, she was her. And this was when I was in college, and we would go out and guys would just flock to her. And I would be like, I don't understand. I'm like, I don't think I'm ugly. I don't think I have a personality. I don't understand why I'm like repelling men. I don't get it. But when you think about it, and again, this relates back to the sexual trauma and the body weight, is that you're not actively upset about it. You're not actionably sitting there ruminating about these issues all the time. But I had been in a toxic relationship for the last 4 years of my life, and I had gotten out of that. And you lose all of your sense of worth when you go through all of these things, and you don't even, again, it's not something I'm actively upset about. I think, oh yeah, fuck that guy, I'm past that, doesn't matter. But I had all of these, not only him, but like childhood friends rejecting you. It's like I have all this fear of rejection deep in my root. And so I was doing exactly what you're describing, repelling people in this way. And it's because you don't want people. I liked what you said at the beginning about being afraid that people will see you how you see yourself. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, and first of all, congratulations to you for getting out of the relationship, because
Thank you.
far too many people stay in them because they think they don't deserve better. Anybody that's in a bad relationship, that's in a relationship where somebody isn't rooting for you, isn't hoping the best for you, isn't kind to you, leave them behind. Like,
Yeah.
yay for you that you got out. I'm so glad.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so true. And when I see people, I think the hardest part now is seeing people that do, like friends and family that are in those same situations. As soon as you are out of it, you see it. You know what I mean? So it is
Yeah.
a big
And
thing.
it's like they don't think they deserve better. And of
Right.
course they
And
deserve better.
right. And you can only imagine how they're talking to themselves.
Yeah, yeah, no, awful, awful, awful. So yay for you. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I wanted to talk to you about at what point you realized that self-compassion was missing from your life.
So I kind of did always know that. I was very relentless with myself in terms of what I needed to do. I was just very rigid and unforgiving, really, in everything that I approached. I could never work hard enough. I could never do enough because, I just always felt like I was lacking.
Yeah.
So, when I was in therapy, my therapist used to rail against it all the time. She was like, "You're just so relentless." And, it's funny. She was like, it was even the way I approached therapy. She was like, and I had shared with you that I run, and I had started running marathons, and I was exhausted, and I had started my own business, and I worked for myself, and it was my busy season, and I was constantly doing something, and I was exhausted. And she's like, your body is telling you from every different angle it wants you to slow down, and you just won't do it. And she was like, it's this frenetic energy that you attach to everything. She's like, even to therapy, to like solving every riddle, to trying to untease everything so you can get to the answer. And she's like, sometimes things just need to, I hate this word, percolate, but it's like they just need time, and they'll sort themselves out. But you can't always, this is my mission, I'm going to fix this today. That's just, it doesn't work.
Everything you say, I'm like, why does my brain work the same way? Because especially too, like how we were talking about the predicting the future, like always trying to predict
Yeah.
what's going to happen and what solution I'm going to
Plotting scenarios so that I was prepared. I never wanted to be unprepared.
Yes, exactly.
I didn't want to be caught by surprise. And, I will say, like, you had asked me before, like, really insightful moments that you had in therapy, and I had a ton of them. But one of the big ones that I had is, like, for me to be unwitting, to not anticipate, there's no greater sin, because that's when there's the possibility of bad things happening by not being aware, by not seeing. And for me, it's a totally irrational one. But one of the incidents that really was emblazoned in my mind with my stepfather was I was home alone with him. And I thought I should have known better than to put myself in a position to be alone with him. I was under 5. Like, how could I have anticipated what anybody would do? And I honestly thought I was alone, which my mother left me alone and not. And it was like, I kept coming back to this, but it was like, it's kind of always haunted me my whole life. Like, being unaware can lead to horrible things. So I always try to anticipate what could happen.
Right, absolutely. And just to speak to, because I feel like in that example, a person on the outside can look in and see, of course, Patty, of course, that it was not your fault. And of course, that adult was supposed to be the one protecting you, not harming you. But I feel like a lot of the time we can start to be horrible in the self-compassion category when we are adults and things happen as adults because you think, oh, I should have known better, or oh, I've experienced this so many times, I should have known better. But like in an example similar to that one, like let's just say you are staying in a bad relationship. Okay, the person's cheating on you all of the time, they're manipulating you, they're gaslighting you, you're being manipulated, you're being fed a false reality, and so you're making decisions based on that false reality. And even if nobody else is involved and it's just you and you made a bad mistake or something like that, you did your best with the knowledge that you had at that time. There's always, and that can change from minute to minute. So I just think that there's always there's always room for that self-compassion. You just have to allow that space. Do you think that you were given that space through therapy?
I think it was a hard fought battle for me to get there, but it is interesting when you were talking. I was thinking about an example, and it's kind of applicable to what you're saying. In that, first of all, I would go back to love shouldn't hurt ever, and I think so many of us are wounded in childhood that we kind of accept that love can hurt. Right.
Mm.
And it shouldn't. I'm not saying love isn't difficult, but it shouldn't hurt. So when somebody is hurtful to you, you need to really think about, does this person love me? What I consider love, right? Not necessarily what they consider love. They might consider that love, but you don't know what kind of baggage they have. But when with my best friend, we had gone on vacation to Florida and we were at a resort and there were a bunch of little kids there. And it was and it was around the time where I was really like digging into all this stuff in therapy. And I saw a bunch of little children and it was really eye opening where I thought, of course, these children could never have protected themselves. What I expected of myself at that age was completely unrealistic, but I didn't know any better, right? Because I'm looking at it through my adult eyes. I'm looking at it through the prism of today. So just like you're talking about with your scenario, you know what? Maybe last month you didn't realize it, but now you had this insight. So it's like, look to the outside world to see an example and think, wow, if I saw a couple and so was treating the other one like that, what would I think?
Right. And you approach it through the prism of today. I love that.
Exactly.
Because you didn't have that knowledge 20 minutes ago or whatever.
Exactly. We're constantly changing, right? And that's the whole point. We learn and we grow and we get wiser and we make connections we couldn't before. We see what we could not see.
Right, absolutely, exactly. How did you begin to practice self-compassion? What were some of the beginning tools that you used in order to get you closer to where you are now?
I think there are several. One of the ones we had talked about was meditation. Meditation was really key for me. And again, because meditation is about now. I think, again, being in nature. And it is funny because I struggled with my weight for so long that I really used to hate being out. Like I didn't like being seen. So I would like really do anything in my power. And if I had to be out, I wanted to wear a coat. Like I wanted to be covered. I wanted to be hidden.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like, again, being less than perfect, I was still willing to go outside. And then it's like, once I was outside and I was in the park and I was like, wow, it's so pleasurable. It makes me so happy. It's so peaceful. And I think it's funny too, like I've definitely had friends who were heavy or, didn't like the way they looked. And it's like, they're afraid to go to the gym. Nobody's looking at you. I mean, this is the reality too. Everybody is so wrapped up in themselves. Nobody cares about you.
That's God, yes. I literally just talked to one of my friends this morning about this. She's like terrified to go to the gym, and she messaged me because I'm a gym goer, and she was like, I just got a membership at my local gym. I'm gonna go to the
Yay!
gym. I know, I was so excited for her, and she was like, but I'm afraid because what if I don't know how to work a machine? Like I don't want to look stupid and look, and I was like, nobody's looking at you. Everybody's worried about the same thing. I said, plus you're not going to a gym that it's like all of these psycho gym rats. You know, you're going there and there's probably just gonna be old people. Nobody cares. No.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And you know what? So ask someone for help. That's
Right.
the other
That's
thing too.
absolutely.
That was a big thing for me. I would have sooner died than asked somebody for help in any situation. And I think that's kind of the big thing too. People like to help, right? They do. I mean, I live in New York City. If somebody asks me for directions, I always stop and help
You're
them.
like, yeah, I
Most
know where to
people
go.
do, right? Like people like to be helpful.
Yeah.
So you don't know how to use a machine? Ask somebody who works there. It's their job.
Right. Right, absolutely. And it does tie into that self compassion, you know, because that's what's happening. Like when you're afraid to do certain things like that, it's that you're inside your head going, God, I'm an idiot. God, I don't know anything. Everybody's going to think I don't know anything. And it comes back to what you had just said, that I'm literally going to think about for the rest of my life. The idea that you don't want people to think about you what you think about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big
And
one.
I was actually thinking too that when I was in college, I originally was, I wanted to be a doctor, and I had a chemistry class, and I couldn't see out of the microscope. And I was too embarrassed to tell my instructor I couldn't see out of the microscope. So guess
Mhm.
what? I couldn't see out of the microscope, which is really limiting in a chemistry class. I ultimately dropped it, right? And
Oh,
I mean, obviously, I was not meant to be a doctor,
sure.
but you never know, right? But like I was that hindered, so afraid to look foolish. And it's like I was an idiot, right? Like the 12 seconds that I would have seemed foolish to myself. And I'm sure that person would have been like, I wish everybody would ask me how to adjust their microscope so they could see. It's like, yeah, but you're so, your judgments against yourself are so oppressive, so weighty.
Right. One thing that we had talked about too when we originally recorded that I kind of wanted to touch on again was when we were talking about how you have this root of an issue and you don't know other people's roots of their issue, that you think that, everybody's going to be looking at me or everybody's going to have these opinions of me, but you don't even know your own roots. Why would you know anybody else's roots and how they've gotten to the place that they're at? So I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was that we were discussing with that, but do you have any feedback?
Well, well, I think it's just that, we all present these images of ourselves to the world, right? So that we can move around in it. And, I had one job where I literally had to psych myself up every time I went into the office where I'd be like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, people like me, right? Because you're putting on a facade. It's like you're wearing a mask. And when I was in therapy and I was deeply unhappy at the time, I worked in a big team of people, and one of the people went apple picking, and she brought everybody an apple, and mine was like out of a storybook. It was this beautiful apple with a vine and leaves and blah 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 blah. And somebody was like, "Wow, like mine's just this crappy apple, but look at yours." But she had such an idealized view of what my life was like based on the image and the persona I projected, which couldn't have been more different than what I felt inside.
Yes.
But it's like you need to move through the world in a way that you can move through the world. So I think it's so easy, or Instagram or any of these other things where you look at people, it's like, wow, they seem so together. Look how beautiful they are. Look how great their life is. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And I think even we hear all these tragic stories about people who die from drug addictions who get out there and say, I'm clean and sober. It's a
Mhm.
struggle. It's hard to do these things. We're not perfect, but I think it's the shame of failure that makes these people perpetuate a lie that they go out into the world and they're like, I'm great, I'm doing great. Far better for everybody to be able to say, you know what, I am struggling, and let other people help them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, just in line with like the perfectionism and having this false reality of what it is that we're striving to achieve. I was talking about vintage style with my fiance last night, and we
Is he
were,
a nice man?
yes, he's wonderful.
Okay, okay,
Thank
all right.
God. We got rid of the old in with the new.
Okay, yay. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. But I was talking to him about this style. It's these couple steps, but then like dumb it down into real life. And it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. You could do that for everything that you see perfection wise, that, you know, you see this like perfection image. So like this super cute Pinterest-esque style, but then say, okay, but what pieces in my closet can I make that into a real life? And you can apply that to any scenario. You know, you say, okay, realistically, self-compassion looks like maybe, again, like I had said before, almost leaning into toxic positivity. But let's rein that in and say, okay, but how could I be nice to myself without being unrealistic?
Oh, yeah. Like you believe the worst parts about yourself instead of the best parts about yourself.
Right.
And
Right.
don't
But you
get
can
entitled to
like,
happiness or
yeah, and just being, but I guess my point is just being able to like take the pretty image, take the perfect image, and saying, okay, rein it in. I get that that's like idealistic and the whatever the perfect goal, but that's not what my reality is going to look like.
and it's not what most people's realities look like, I think is the other really important thing to say.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I was gonna say that sounds a little depressing, but
No, because I think again, I think it's so easy to, and when you were talking about that, it made me think about, and this is like a newer thing, and again, I'm old at this point, but it was like when everybody stages their engagement shots and there are these picture perfect things, and it's like, is that really what's important? Like that you want to present this image, and it's like, how about the fact that you're just happy? Right? Like, isn't that good enough? Does everything need to be curated? Does everything need to be an Instagram worthy moment? That's not what life is. And I think that's the disconnect between when we hear these stories about people that we think have it all together and then they unfortunately take their lives or something horrible happens. And it's like, because there's like they can't exist because there's such a schism between who they are and what they experience and what they are projecting. And like I think the goal is to be your authentic self, to learn enough about yourself to understand what things about yourself you think are fantastic and really go with that. And what things about yourself that, given a little time, you might try to work on because it'll make you feel better about you, whatever that is. And maybe it's something as simple as you had said, drinking water. Maybe it's something as simple as somebody like me who used to hate to be seen, starting to walk around the block just to get out there and see like the world's not going to come crashing to an end because you're outside and somebody sees you. And I think there's a lot of shame that we have in the way we look that unfortunately permeates kind of everything we do when we engage with the world. But do try to remember, nobody cares, right? Like everybody is so self-absorbed, nobody cares. And if somebody says something unkind to you, think, what an asshole, what happened to them in their life that they're like this? And I always try to think to myself, if I can't find compassion for someone, I try to find pity, because there are just really horrible people out there that I can't find compassion for, that I think, you know what, you're an asshole, you deserve everything awful thing that happens to you. But I do try to find pity for them. Because again, what happened to them to make them that way, to make them so unkind?
that is so insightful because I have struggled with so compassion. I'm sure you know is like a Buddhist thing that like they're like you have to find compassion for everybody. You have to see yourself in everybody. But right, there's people that just suck. And I
Yes,
did
yeah.
not feel compassion for you, but I do find myself feeling pity or able to feel pity. Like there's somebody that's in my family life that's just a total narcissist, and I'm able to say, okay, you are just a highly anxious person, and I can relate to anxiety, so I can pity that, and I can get that. So that's a really good, important tip. I think another cool thing that you said too was when you were talking about being able to really know yourself. It reminds me of I saw it on a show, and the girl was just like her boyfriend wanted her to move in with them, and she wasn't move in with him, and she wasn't giving him an answer quick enough, and they were fighting about it, and she was just like, that's not who I am. I analyze everything. I think things through. And so I just thought it was interesting that something that maybe you don't think is good about yourself, like something that maybe you don't like about yourself, you can find a way to reframe it in your mind that you're like, but this is who I am. I'm loyal to a fault. Maybe I let that guy walk all over me, but it's because I'm loyal, and I can work on not letting people treat me like shit and do that, but move away from shitting on myself because of my trait of being a loyal person.
Yes, yes. Or, sometimes, I mean, again, I've had friendships over my life where I think people come in and out of your life for a reason. And I've had multiple friendships where I'm very good in a crisis. And, I've had friends where something has gone horribly wrong in their life and it has made us very close because I'm good in a crisis. And then kind of after the crisis fades, you know what, we never really should have been that close. And it's like the friendship ends. And I've had several people like this in my life where I thought they got more out of the friendship than me, but I will never be sorry that I was there for someone during a difficult time in their life. And I
Right.
trust that over the course of my life, I will have people who are in my corner that give more to me than I gave to them.
Right. Absolutely. That's so true. So, what were I'm curious of what some of the biggest challenges that you had were when you were starting to gain self compassion, or even once you had it and were still like finding yourself tripping up with it. The reason I ask is more so because I feel, again, falling into line with that perfectionist mentality, you can, I feel like when we start learning this self compassion, we vary. So what were things that you found challenging?
I think it's no different than any other goal or objective you have. It's never a straight line. And the best of intentions, we fall back, we slip sometimes. You and I had been talking earlier, and you were like, "What makes you anxious?" And I was like, and I kind of struggled, and I was like, "I guess when I have a new client and I'm not sure that I'm meeting their expectations or whatever." And as it happened, I had a meeting right after when we got off the phone, and the person was not unkind, but certainly curt.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, either they hate their job, they're having a bad day, they don't like me. Like I went through all of these things and I was like, what difference does it make? Why? Why? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. Like that's who they are. That's what they brought to the meeting. It's got nothing to do with me. And even if it does have something to do with me, nothing that I'm aware of. So I'm going to let it go. But it's like,
Right.
I think it's easy to fall back into those traps of what did I do? Why don't they like me? I just think it's
Yeah.
easy to forget. Just as it's easy, I think, people, this is a huge one, particularly in the beginning of the year, people set goals for working out, and it's like they miss a time and they think it's ruined, right? Like it's over. I missed one.
Yeah.
No, it's not ruined. It's not over. Tomorrow's a new day. Start
Yeah.
again tomorrow. And I think that's the thing is like we're not perfect and we stop. No, we weren't perfect today. That's okay. We're not striving for perfect. We're striving for good. We're striving for better. I mean, I think we're striving for better. That's it.
Right, absolutely. I was literally just talking about that, being able to find wellness without the all or nothing mentality.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
because that's not what life is. And I had been in Weight Watchers too many times to count, but I have a couple of Weight Watchers sayings that I loved. And one of them was, if you drop an egg, you don't break the rest of the dozen. That's absolutely true. You don't. You clean it up and you move on. Or if you're driving, I don't drive, I live in the city, but if you're driving and you miss your turn, you don't keep going. You stop, you turn around, you go back. You just don't continue to proceed down the wrong path because you missed your turn. And
Right.
it's like, that's how life is. Sometimes you take the wrong step, whatever, you just start over.
Those are such good analogies. It's so true.
So, just we've talked about a lot of actionable steps, things that people can do, but I feel like a lot of the time that can be, what word do I want to use? Like it's all good and dandy, but you can't make it happen in the day to day. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and I actually saw her do this in real time. She tried to be personable with somebody that she works with, and they didn't respond the way that she wanted them to, or just didn't. They responded dry. So then, as she's like talking about it and like getting kind of worked up about it, she says, "But you know what? I like me. I like who I am." And I said, "I like you too." And she was like, "Exactly. Like, I know that I'm a good person, and maybe I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I know that I'm, a pleasure to be around. It's not like I'm a bad person." And she was like, "And you know what? I would rather be the person that tried to, with this person and tried to be personable than never try at all and just be quiet and all of that stuff. Like, that's not who I want it to be." And it was really cool to watch her change the way that she was thinking about it and to watch her like actually have that self-compassion out loud. So what would you say are some daily habits that we can practice to start to bring that into our everyday life?
That's a good one. I mean, and I do think that that's a nice example. And I do think that people that are on the healthier side of the spectrum can do that, right? Because it's like, you know yourself, you like yourself, you see the good in yourself. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, based on their, own traumas, really are full of self-loathing, and it's hard to see anything as not being their fault. So I think
Mhm.
for those people, it's going to be very natural for them to be like, this person rejected me. They think I'm a bad person or whatever. And it's harder to get out of that. I think for people who are there, there's a couple things. One of them is like, it's faking it till you make it. So, it's better to be an optimistic person than a pessimistic person. It's not natural for everybody. If you paste a smile on your face every day, after a while, it becomes second nature. It's like doing things that just become habit, smiling at people. For me, it was making eye contact with men, like being able to look up, like to be able to accept the space that you're in and be okay inhabiting that space. And I think
Yeah.
for a lot of people, it starts really that small, like,
Mhm.
just trying to reach out to other people in that way. One of the things that I did, and I think it's at the core of my self care, is I am much happier outside than inside. I I shouldn't say that because my dog would like to never be inside. But I am very fortunate. I live near Central Park. I go there every day. Like for
Mhm.
me, being out in nature is like the most restorative thing I can do, because it's like there is beauty everywhere. We just have to be willing to see it. And like when
Yeah.
I'm in the park, I see beauty everywhere. So
That's a good one. Being able to like take a step back and be present and recognize the things that are pretty and live in the now instead of living in your brain. Because I feel like a lot of the time I'm like, oh, wait, I'm fully experiencing life only in my mind. Like I'm never experiencing outside of my body and outside in real life. So that's a really good one.
And another one for me is, I had read, and it was like just a life changing book. It was called Boys in the Boat. It's about, and it's nonfiction, which is not my thing, but it was amazing. It's about the 1936 men's rowing Olympic team. And it's the star, or the main character, has this shit childhood, and he really just horrible. And through the course of it, he's like, he realizes he's in swing with his boys in the boat. And what he means is, it's like they are one boy, they are one body, they are one mind, they operate as one. And I had read this, and I was like, oh, I wish I had a team of my own, and I don't. And and I'm running one day, and I'm thinking, I wish I was in swing with the team. And I thought, I am in swing with the universe. And I believe that. I feel like I am in swing with the universe. I want what the universe wants, no matter what, even if it's shitty, even if it's horrible, because I trust that no matter what it is, I'm going to be fine at the end. And sometimes
Yes.
you have to go through bad things to get to good things. And I just trust. And I think for me, I always felt alone. And that made me feel connected to something, because not all of us feel connected to people or things or relationships or whatever. And I think it's lonely. And like having that sense of connection to the universe just opened up my world to feel more
Yes.
connected.
Absolutely. That is such a good point. And I love that you don't have to. I feel like, especially like what you're talking about feeling that pull to find a romantic connection, or and you can do it with friends too, like feeling like you're left out, feeling like you're not experiencing something in life, but being able to find something else to companion yourself with. I don't know the right words to use, but like so that you don't feel so alone. It doesn't have to be that you're relying on another human being, since you can't
Exactly.
control what other people do. You can only
Exactly.
control what you do. I love that.
Yeah, and that's like such a smart thing you just said, though, too. It's like the only person you can control is yourself, nobody else.
Right.
So, like, if for anybody out there who's like, I'm going to have them do my partner, my this, my no, nobody's doing anything. It's you. It's all. It's
Yeah.
you. You can only control you.
Right, absolutely. For someone who's just starting out on this journey, what advice would you give them to start embracing self-compassion without feeling guilty or like selfish?
Well, I do want to say, for anybody who has suffered any kind of trauma, particularly as a child, whether it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, whatever it is, and unfortunately that's most of us. Whatever happened to you, it is not your fault. So start there. Like, that's the first place I would start. Whatever happened is not your fault, no matter what. If you were a child, it is not your fault. There's always an adult who is responsible for you, or should have been responsible for you. So I think if you can let go of that, that would be the first one. And then the second one would be, really try to extend yourself a little bit of grace. None of us is perfect. Nobody. And nobody you look at, you don't know what's happening behind closed doors. You don't know what anybody's life is like. People put on masks for how they want the world to see them. And we live in a highly curated world, whether it's Instagram or whatever it is, where you are seeing a picture, and a picture can be distorted in 100 different ways, right? You're not seeing the true thing. So just try to remember, nobody's life is perfect. Nobody gets through this life without pain, right? We just don't. That's the human experience. So try to be kind to yourself. Just try.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could tack what word do I want to use? Self-trust onto the end of that, what would you say to that? Because I feel like a lot of the time, like, because I said guilty and selfish, but like I feel when I am not being self-compassionate, a lot of the time it's not that I like feel like, oh, like I shouldn't be like I'm too conceited or I shouldn't be talking about myself like that or something like that. It's more that I just don't trust myself. That like I trust the negative thoughts more than the positive thoughts. Do you have anything that you could give advice on about that?
Again, I think understanding yourself is key. So like a lot of times, particularly food made me feel, because food represented more than food to me, right? It was multi-layered. It really was. And so it made me feel like a bad person, right? Like doing certain things made me feel like a fundamentally bad person. And one of the things that I used to tell myself was, I binged. I ate more cookies than I wanted. I ate more cake than I wanted. I didn't kill anybody. It's like I think we catastrophize, and I think that we blow out of proportion what we've done to what we think the punishment should be. So you know
Mm,
what? It wasn't a hate crime, not even against myself. I ate more cookies. Nobody was hurt. I will live to see another day, right? It's like putting it in its proper perspective, because I think we lose perspective about what's important and what's not. So I think that's kind of the first thing. Like, really, what was it? And if it was your sister, your friend, somebody you cared about told you the same thing, what would your reaction be? Like, does
yeah.
the crime fit the punishment?
Yes, absolutely. That's a good one. If you some an outside person said that, or would you say that to your best friend or your sister or your
Exactly.
mom,
Exactly.
whoever? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. How did letting go of perfectionism change your perspective on wellness and healing?
I think that is, there's a saying that I love. It's like letting go of the perfect for the good. And,
Mhm.
we're never going to achieve perfection. And, whatever your goal is, particularly as it relates to the physical, if you want to lose 10 pounds, you want to run faster, if you want to do this, you want to do that, that's great. It's great to have goals. They don't fundamentally make you a better person. So it's like
Mhm.
important to understand that. What's important is, are you kind? Do people come to you because they trust you, that they think you're good? That's more important than these other things. And I think we get very hung up on the optics. And when all is said and done, if you could only have one person in your life, is it going to be the most beautiful, or is it going to be the person who's the kindest, the most compassionate, the smartest, whatever, attributes are important to you?
Right. Wellness isn't about getting everything right. It's about those things that you just said. And it's about being nice to yourself and actually being able to enjoy your life because you're not being so aggressive about everything that you got wrong and just being able to be happy with what you do right.
Well, and it's like if you've ever done yoga, and I used to be into yoga because I
Hmm.
was always in pain.
Love
Yoga's a
yoga.
practice, and that's what they always say. It's a
Yes.
practice. It's never going to be perfection. It's a
Right.
practice. No matter how good
Right.
you are, it's a practice.
Right, exactly. I say that all the time. Like when you are so worried about, just for an example, like setting boundaries, you go to a person that you need to set boundaries with, and it doesn't look exactly as you picture it in your head. That's okay. You just practice it for the next time. It might never look exactly as you pictured in your head, but you made a little bit of progress. You're even thinking about setting the boundary, which might be more progress than you've made in the past. So for sure, it's a practice. I like that.
Yeah. And, I do want to say something about boundaries, because boundaries was a big issue for me with men. I didn't feel entitled to set them because, given my past, I didn't have boundaries, right? I couldn't set boundaries. So I didn't feel entitled to set them as an adult, which I was doing.
Right.
And, I would say one of the things and I had to think about it actively and consciously, and I still do, is it okay to put other people's needs and wants before your own, if they should be before your own? Like if you have a child, if you're in a relationship, sometimes you have to put other people first. But if you don't know someone or they're not important to you, your needs and wants should come first. Like, don't sacrifice your happiness for someone else, especially someone who's not important to you and who may never be important to you. And I think
Hmm.
a lot of us do that.
Absolutely. I think the biggest takeaway that I've had from everything that you've said is that self-compassion isn't a luxury. It's something that you deserve and it's normal and it's something that you should strive to have. You should work to have that. Whatever that looks like, if it's boundary setting, if it's just the way you talk to yourself, all of the things that you've talked about. To wrap things up, I like to play a game with my guests. It's called Kinda Toxic, Kinda Well. So the reason I play this game is because I typically have people on that are seemingly having it all together, but it shows that, there's still things that everybody's working on. But because you guys typically do have a lot of it together, you give some pretty valuable insight. So I've got a couple more questions if you'd like to
Okay,
play.
great. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, sweet. When do you find yourself feeling anxious?
I am most anxious when I am not in control, and I've worked very hard on being controlling. And one of the therapists I had worked with had said to me, he was like, I want you to learn that you can be in control without being controlling. You can be vulnerable without being powerless. And that for me is being in control is safe, right?
Hmm.
But that's not how life works. And so I tend to get anxious when I'm not in control or my routine is really disrupted. So recently I had to go travel to visit family and I was out of my house for a week. And, by the end of it, I'm like, I just need to clean something so that I can feel in control.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. What causes you to doubt yourself?
What causes me to doubt myself? Work can come up depending on I get, I'm much older than you, but I think, one of the nice things about getting older is like you kind of know who you are and you feel like you have
Yeah.
mastery over certain things. And, new clients, like not being sure that I'm meeting their expectations or, like that, I'll have a moment of doubt. And then, but to your point about self compassion and all the rest of it, I remind myself how good I am at what I do. And if I'm not able to be successful, it's certainly not for lack of trying, which I think that's my bugaboo. People that don't work hard, like it's okay to work hard and fail, but it's not okay to fail because you don't work hard.
Right. Absolutely. I love that. That's so true. When do you catch yourself feeling resentful?
When people don't say what they want to say. So I am a very stereotypical New Yorker. There's nothing I will say behind your back that I won't have the balls to say to your
Yeah.
face. So I
Same
hate
here, sister.
passive aggressive people who don't say what they want to say.
Yeah. Spit it out. I'm from Chicago. I get the same vibe. When do you feel shameful?
um that's changed over the years. Overeating, binging used to really make me feel shameful. It doesn't anymore because again, it's a choice. Um, Shame is the most toxic of emotions in my view, and I don't know that I feel shameful anymore. I think that there are things that so for instance, I was talking to my sister the other day and she was not happy about something. And I honestly, I wasn't as kind as I could have been. And I got off the phone and I thought, I'm an asshole, right? Like I should have been kinder. And I called her the next day and I apologized. So like I feel like things that make me feel guilty, that's
Mm,
probably as close as I'm gonna get to shameful.
sure. Sure. Absolutely. Last one. If you could give one piece of advice to someone trying to become more well than toxic, what advice would you give them?
Um, Whatever you think your sins are, forgive yourself. Like just forgive yourself, start over. It's a new day. Just try to be the person you want to be. And you know, however long it takes, it takes. It's not a zero sum game. Every day that you can work towards being a little bit healthier, a little bit happier, it's a victory. That's
Mhm.
just, and again, really seize those moments, be proud of yourself, congratulate yourself for them, set small goals, and celebrate every win.
Absolutely. That's a good one. Where can people find you?
So I have a website. It's pattycabot.com, pattycabot.com. And I wrote a book. It's really about the different therapies I tried. And it's called Not That Girl Anymore. And it's available for free on my website. So
And I will have that link down below as well. I'm going to include it all for
excellent.
everybody to have access to. Perfect.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I had the best time with you. I had like just the best conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me into your world.
Okay, guys, isn't she like literally great? I don't know if it's just like me and my ego thinking that it's so nice to talk to somebody whose brain sounds to work exactly like mine. Like the way that she would just like take things right out of my mind and say them. I hope she did that for you too, because it was so validating and it made me feel like I'm not insane. And it makes me feel like, there's hope to not be so not self-compassionate, that it's possible to accept yourself, good and bad pieces, and love yourself anyways. So thank you so much for joining me today on Wellish. I hope this conversation gave you some insight and encouragement to break free from that self-blame cycle and start nurturing more self-compassion for yourself. Remember, the negative voice may feel louder sometimes, but you do have the power to quiet it and embrace the positive one instead. And I don't want to say that entirely, because I do think, like I might have said it in the episode, I can't remember, but if it was this one or the one that got recorded the first time that didn't get saved, but just that I feel like sometimes when we hear self-compassion, we can say, oh, you just gotta be positive and say all the positive things, and it could almost lead into like toxic positivity. So I just want to give you a reminder to think more, maybe realistic is a better way to think of it than positive, because and that's not an excuse to like be a dick, like, and be like, oh well, the reality is that I actually fucking suck. So but it's saying, what's really happening here, kind of like in the example I gave about my friend, that she was like, okay, the truth is this is the kind of person I would rather be, or the truth is this is where I'm at in my journey, or the truth is whatever. And now that you have all of this awareness from listening to this episode, you now have the power to start catching yourself when you're not being compassionate with yourself, and again, quiet it and embrace that more realistic yet kind voice instead. As you begin to show yourself more compassion, you'll start attracting the life you truly deserve, honestly. Because I know, and when I hear people say that too, I'm always like, yeah, okay, whatever. But like, for real, because I can't even get over, I said it at the beginning, but I love what she said about how you don't act these ways because you're afraid that people are going to see you how you see you. And until you start seeing you in a better light, until you start liking yourself, you're not going to be afraid to show yourself to other people. And then again, starting to like attract these like genuine relationships, or whatever, whatever it is you're trying, confidence, being able to not have social anxiety, whatever it is, you're being able to set boundaries, knowing that you're solid in your opinion, and so you don't care about other people's, it really does start to bring all of that in once you can be more compassionate with yourself. Before you go, I just want to remind you that wellness isn't about striving for perfection. It's about progress, and it's about giving yourself grace along the way. Embracing who you are in this moment, imperfections and all, is a huge part of the journey. So take a deep breath. Know you are doing your best, even if that doesn't look the same day to day, minute to minute, and that's more than enough. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support the show is by leaving a rating and review, unless it's less than 5 stars. Then keep that to yourself. But 5 stars, leave a 5-star rating and review. Support the show. Thank you very much. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode packed with insights and encouragement to help you live your most authentic life. I will talk to you guys next Monday, but until then, take a moment this week to be kind to yourself. I know you are doing better than you think. You are, because you're listening to this. You're on the right track. Progress, not perfection, baby. Bye, guys. I'll talk to you next week.